Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. I'm just sitting here drinking my morning coffee before I get my daily squats out of the way. I had someone ask me about that yesterday, like, wait, so do you squat without eating? Like, no guys, I drink 2 big cups of coffee, then I eat some breakfast, some good carbs and protein, and then I squat. Now that we've got that clear. James Tiny Vest made a video, I guess a day or two ago, and he didn't have my name in the title, but he addressed me in it because I guess it was people asking about my video that probably brought him to it. And here's the big shock. We just had a fitness YouTuber disagree on a point with another fitness YouTuber and behave like a mature adult male human being. I'm not sure how often that really happens. I'm not sure how often that really happens. Now, normally, I wouldn't even care that a channel smaller than mine disagreed with me. I wouldn't care. In this case, he did it in a very mature way, and therefore I'm actually going to address it. I think it's a worthwhile topic. I'll engage him in some dialogue because he wasn't a dick. And see, people, this is how you get a conversation started with someone. If you disagree with somebody and your goal isn't just to piss them off, or you're not doing it for antics or whatever else, you actually want to discuss with them your point of disagreement and have them listen to you. Pro tip. Do it like he did. Now, he admitted he doesn't like everything I do. He admitted there are times when I trigger him. There are times when things that I say bring out certain negative emotions in him. But there are other times when he likes what I have to say, other times when I'm entertaining, that my humanity comes out, or that I'm informative. So it's a balance. And you know what? I can appreciate that. I respect that. I can definitely understand that there are people who I trigger with stuff. In fact, a lot of it I do intentionally. It is what it is. Entertainer and an educator by profession. My job to make you feel something, guys. So I don't have any problem with him saying that. And there's nobody on YouTube who I like everything they do. There are YouTube channels that I watch that I don't like everything they do. I don't like everything they do. Some of the stuff pisses me off, but I still watch them because I like them. See how that works? But to his points, he had pointed out that, that he's got his own views of why bodybuilders get hurt. And he actually did make some valid points in there. And I'm going to jump over to the machine thing in a minute specifically. But he had said, you can't say this is always how bodybuilders train. And I think that's a fair assessment. When we talk about that as far as how bodybuilders train, he's right. There are tons of different ways that bodybuilders train, because what people need to understand, and this is what the research is showing more and more and more, there is no set way to build muscle. We've got studies now showing that the 1 to 3 rep range has the potential to build the exact same amount of muscle that the hypertrophy rep range does, and that 20 plus rep sets can build the exact same amount of muscle that hypertrophy range can. And this is like Dr. Gaines, Dr. Brad is saying this. We have studies showing that you can use totally different exercises to develop the same amount of size in a given muscle. In other words, compound movements versus isolation movements, as long as the muscle is a primary mover, they all have the same rough potential to build muscle mass. In other words, your exercise selection, or say your biceps, may not be as important as you simply getting in and getting workload done. We know full range of motion builds more muscle than partials, but if you do enough partials, it doesn't matter, does it? Because you still get that overall growth stimulus. You can always make up for ineffective exercises with more volume, and it seems to still cause the muscle growth you want. In other words, muscle growth is easy to achieve from a programming perspective. Now, obviously, you got to go in and put some work in, and you may have to put in many, many, many years of work in, but that's a valid point. There is no one way to build muscle. In bodybuilders, their training, they're generally concerned with building muscle. Then you factor in the amount of drugs used, the way you train becomes less important anyways. The drugs will put muscle on you. So that's one element of it, because bodybuilding is more than training. And I know he pointed out a lot of people talk about different types of people are classified as bodybuilders. Well, that's true. I don't classify different types of people as bodybuilders. Now, if you guys see my training clips of me standing up, I'm actually, again, a lot bigger than a lot of people realize now they're watching my training clips. They see me standing, moving, lifting weight. Oh, yeah, he's actually bigger than we thought. I build muscle. I'm not a bodybuilder. I don't classify myself as one. And I care about muscle size because I don't plan on dieting down to 5% body fat and standing on a stage posing covered in oil in a thong. Okay, therefore I'm not a bodybuilder. That's what a bodybuilder is. It's a competitive endeavor. You're not a power lifter just because you care about your max deadlift, right? If a guy says, hey, I want to get my deadlift to 500 pounds, that's a goal of mine, and I'm going to work really hard at it, that doesn't make them a power lifter. Even though we associate a max deadlift with powerlifting. Doesn't make you a power lifter. It means you're a guy who likes to work out, who set a goal. So for me, that's what I'm saying when I'm talking about bodybuilders. I'm talking about people who compete. And I think the point we get to is back to the other point of people trying to train specifically for bodybuilding who are not going to compete. I don't think that that's really worth their time as an endeavor as the actual goal. And the reason I say that, because any style of training, there's a dozen different training styles that can maximize your muscle growth. You might as well pick a training style that's going to have more benefits beyond just the muscle building, is the point I make. If you're going to just be a recreational lifter, you're not there to compete in bodybuilding. You probably don't have the genetics. To look like a bodybuilder. You're probably not going to use the drugs to look like a bodybuilder. So you can train however you want. All you can do is maximize your muscle potential. Okay, that's all you're going to be able to do in the gym. And it might be an amazing potential and it might not be such an amazing potential. All you can do in the gym is maximize it. So what I would recommend is, since you're not going to go be a pro bodybuilder, don't focus on that as your goal. Don't try to train for bodybuilding specifically. Train to maximize your muscle mass, your strength, your injury prevention, your athleticism. You're going to spend the hour every day in the gym anyways, right? You're going to be there anyways. You might as well get some other benefits out of it. And I think that's kind of the point I want to make with all that. Because again, he points out the thing of the freak accidents that he knew a power lifter who, because I watched this whole video, fell on the floor, fell off of a skateboard. And the guy was a top level power lifter, coached the bench press, an amazing bench presser, tore both his triceps, falling off a skateboard in front of some kids showing off, falling, hitting the ground. He pointed out when you're strong, connective tissue tears happen. And I think that's a valid criticism we need to have of powerlifting too. I know a lot of powerlifters who train in a way that it still makes them strong, but they're injury prone. And it could be things like exercise selection, range of motion, mobility, and that's what we need to understand. That's the point I make with the machines, is the mobility component of it. How exactly is this guy training his triceps? And I'm not saying that freak accidents can't happen. They do. You can train to be the perfect athlete. And you can still get hit hard enough or get an impact hard enough where you press against something the wrong way with enough inertia and it rips something. It can happen to anybody. And yeah, being strong in certain cases can be a detriment. But that doesn't matter where that strength comes from. It doesn't matter whether you got it from training, following Arnold Schwarzenegger's routine, or whether you got it from using some top-level powerlifter's routine. You're still going to have muscle strength if your muscles are big. Size and strength are very difficult to separate. They're very difficult to separate, and you cannot fully separate them, particularly for people who are drug-free. But it comes back to that point of, if someone's natty, they're only going to develop so much size and strength. And because they're not using drugs that will imbalance connective tissue strength versus muscle size, and that's a point we make with a lot of powerlifters and other people and bodybuilders, you need to be careful when you start thinking about these things. If you're going to go do other endeavors, athletic endeavors outside of just your weight room stuff, you should probably train in the weight room in a way that reduces your likelihood of getting hurt. And also, if you guys are going to cash in your natty card, it's the same thing. You might want to think that through. If you're running drug stacks and you're using only substances that don't cause as much hypertrophy of your tendons as they do your muscles, i.e. most anabolics, and you're not paying any attention to the other stuff, you probably don't want to go do athletic endeavors because you're going to predispose yourself to tears. And that could also have been a factor in the power lifter he was talking about. Maybe the guy ran a lot of tests, a lot of DECA, didn't use any HGH. And maybe he trained what he could do for the powerlifting and it was fine until he was put into a dynamic situation outside of the gym and those tendons were not hypertrophied enough to keep up with his tricep and chest strength when he was thrown into a dynamic stretch type endeavor. And that could have been a factor. I'm not saying it was, might not have been a factor. Could have been, logical that it could be. But that's, again, stuff these guys need to think about who blast a bunch of gear and then think you're going to go do stuff outside the gym. And you didn't pay attention to the ratios you get on things like connective tissue versus muscle strengthening from the stuff you chose to put in your body. You're going to be predisposed to risk, and that could be the case with Callum. Absolutely could be a case. But back to the point about machines. We go back to the point about the ability to stabilize your body and the ability to have mobility, because that's the key point we're talking about. And a lot of powerlifters are guilty of this too. They do too many partials. A lot of powerlifters do too many partials, and it predisposes them to risk. It predisposes them to getting hurt on the bench press. Right? Isn't that what we're talking about? Guys are like, well, these powerlifters get hurt on bench press. Yeah. And how many of them are sitting around doing board presses and other silly shit? Right, that's a factor. I'm going to tell people that you need to be training muscles through almost everything you do in the gym through the dynamic, effective range of motion you have on the exercises available. In other words, when you do a barbell row, you hit your chest on every rep. You get a stretch at the bottom. Same thing with a chin-up. You need to get a stretch at the bottom of a chin-up. When you do a chest press, you need to bring it all the way down to your chest and pause and lock it all the way out. And that's even with free weights. And people who train on free weights like people train on machines, they get injured at a higher rate because they don't have mobility at the terminal ends of the range of motion. They don't have strength. They haven't trained the connective tissue to stretch under load over time. And the same thing, we start talking about tricep tears. Well, people do more close grip bench press. So I do a lot of close grip bench press. It puts a deeper stretch on the tricep tendons at the bottom. However, because you're doing it progressively over years, you train that at a normal functional angle for the triceps that they are supposed to be working through. You're stretching them to their terminal ends near the bottom of a closed grip bench press. It will strengthen that connective tissue to be used to being under load at those more extreme angles with heavy weights. But because you're doing it progressively, you're allowing it to adapt over time because you're only making small jumps. In other words, if you don't ever increase more than 5 pounds on the bar, more than you've done before for that same amount of reps or whatever, you don't ever do more than a small jump, and you spend months and years doing it, that connective tissue adapts to that stretch load. So that's what I'm talking about, is that machines and cables and a lot of this stuff, people are doing too much isolation. Isolation is bad for your connective tissue. It's bad for connective tissue. This is what causes connective tissue inflammation, and a continual state of connective tissue inflammation leads to injuries and tears. Most isolation movements do not work joint angles through a normal movement pattern that they're supposed to go through. Very many of them don't, and they cause a lot of inflammation. Machines can do a lot of the same thing. So that's what I'm talking about as far as injury prevention, training yourself in a way to where you are strong on the terminal ends of the range of motion. Machines are oftentimes a limited range of motion, and how many people do you see on these machines who don't do pause work? They don't go through a deep stretch on every single rep. They haven't built stabilizers. They haven't built stabilizers up. Whereas if people trained with a lot of athletic movements and full range of motion and pause work, you are going to be less likely to get hurt. You're going to be less likely to have inflamed connective tissue that is more prone to rupturing when you are doing other things. There's a reason football players, even though they do get hurt a fair amount, are able to do the endeavors that they do out on the playing field frequently without getting hurt. Now you go throw an average bodybuilder into that, even if they train for football a little bit, they're probably going to get hurt their first game, depending upon how they trained. And that's what we're talking about, doing everything through a full effective range of motion. Train deep squats, Avoid silly stuff like machines. Use big free weight movements and dynamic type movements and explosive movements, stretch reflex movements with free weights most of the time, and you're less likely to get hurt. And then you probably need some sport specific training. Again, he was talking about all that lateral work. Well, squats and cleans will prepare you for that. For football players, that's why squats and cleans are so critical for field athletes, people who are going to get out on the playing field. And I'll tell you right now, even if your goals are physique related, but you plan on playing a lot of pickup games of basketball, or you're going to go play a football game on the weekends, you probably want to spend a lot of time focusing on the movements that will allow you to perform at that. So, I mean, you need to be squatting, you need to be cleaning, you need to be push pressing, and those need to be a heavy focus. Those need to be a much higher priority for you than other movements if you don't want to get hurt. You probably need to do some lateral training and agility training. Probably be a real good idea. You're going to be at the gym anyways. Train to be a little more athletic. And that's kind of the point I make with all that. But people need to understand, when I say that the machines get people hurt, I don't mean in the gym. I'm telling you because people say, well, they get hurt with free weights. And James pointed that out. And I believe that. I don't think he's making that up. But here's the other point we come to. How many of the people who are getting hurt on the big, heavy free weight movements are, again, maybe using a lift that's too big for them? Maybe they used too many of the wrong drugs. Maybe they did too much of this other fluffy work, and then they're at a higher injury rate. But oftentimes they're just lifting a weight that might be too heavy for them. Or they've overreached too much. Their programming is a problem. You shouldn't be hurt in training. You should be hurt in competition, right? If you're going to get hurt, it needs to be in a competitive environment. But we go back to that point. The training on the machines all the time and all the fluff and pump, I believe, predisposes you to getting hurt at a higher rate on the free weights. Because you do create imbalances that way. You do create strength mobility problems in certain joint angles. You do have problems with a lot of your stabilizers as a result of doing that you're going to need when you get under a heavy squat, or you get under a heavy bench press, or we get under a heavy deadlift. And again, we start talking about bicep tears. I think partial curls and doing chin-ups not from a dead hang, not going all the way down and getting the stretch on your back exercises or on your bicep exercises, I believe that's a major factor in people tearing biceps on the deadlift. So we come around to that point of, is the other training contributing to the injuries on the free weights? I believe that it is. And if you're going to go out and do other things, you're going to get on a skateboard when you're a 40-year-old power lifter, or you're going to go rappelling down a cliffside, or you're going to play football on the weekends, you might want to rethink through what you're choosing to spend your time focusing on in the gym. Have you trained your body to have tremendous core stability? Have you trained all the major joints in your body to be able to handle heavy loads through the fullest range of motion that joint is likely to be put through? Is this how you train day in, day out? That's going to matter when you step into these other endeavors that are outside of your wheelhouse. And that's the point I'm making. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.